I broke this small town's list of rules. Now I don't know if I'll make it home alive. I went through a bad breakup. Couldn't get the guy to leave me alone. He was showing up at my work, home, even my mom's house. I decided I couldn't do it anymore. I started looking at states hours away from my hometown. Not for a city, or too small of a town either. I wanted to be able to walk on the sidewalks and get to local shops. Moving to somewhere where I knew no one, it would be nice to live in a neighborly town. I finally settled on a little town in the Pacific Northwest. I flew out to look for a job and a place to live. I spent the first few days walking around the main town, applying at a few shops. I quickly found a small book manufacturing company. I had an interview and fit what they were looking for. After that was settled, I set about finding where Cow, my little tuxedo cat, and I would call home. I started exploring a bit farther from the main town. There were some cute, quiet places, but they weren't calling to me. Then I found my new little neighborhood, Jerusalem Street. It was settled just a bit back from the main road. 3 rows of townhouses in a cul-de-sac. You could tell they had some age, but all were well kept, and it was a lovely little street. Not the near-identical wash of beige and gray that have become so common. Most were light pastels. It looked like people liked living here. Lots of trees and gentle light dappling the ground underneath. It was quiet. A couple of people were out with their dogs or walking to town. There was a small area in the center with a bird feeder, a bench, and a board that people could leave flyers or notes on. It looked like people took pride in making a community. In the row at the back of the cul-de-sac was an empty lavender home with the simple "For Rent" sign out in the front. I spoke to the realtor in town, and everything was taken care of. Luckily, the owners left some basic furniture, so I didn't have to worry about anything too big. I flew back home, packed up my important stuff, and drove across the country with Cow buckled into the passenger seat. Of course, I had to stop and rest for a couple of nights on the way. I let Cow out of a carrier and stretched in a hotel room for the night. I timed our arrival for late morning, so I would have a large part of the day to unpack and to not disturb my new neighbors by getting there too early. Several people stopped by to welcome me as I was going back and forth from the car. An older woman with blue hair and eccentric dress introduced herself as Miss Jules. She said they had a welcoming committee. She was one of the ones that started it, as she lived here for most of her life. The neighborhood had a couple of rules, but nothing too bad or anything like an HOA. They would be around by dinner time.
When you really should be taking a break anyway,
she told me. She was nice. I told her I would be ready, and she said she hoped Cal would come out to see her. I smiled. I spent the next couple of hours getting everything out of the car so I could let Cal into the rest of the house to explore, and I could get a shower before the welcoming committee showed up. Around 5:30, there was a knock on my door, and I saw Miss Jules with a couple of other people. I welcomed them in. Miss Jules introduced me to Dave Hancock, and Kayla, a woman around my age who lived in the row of houses to my right. Miss Jules had brought some sandwiches and bags of assorted chips. We sat around my table, where I had managed to clear most of my stuff off. She commented that I had done well for one day of work. We sat around eating and making small talk. Kayla seemed shy, but told me she would be happy to show me around town if I wanted to stay. I'm sure I'll take you up on that, but what do you mean, if I want to stay? Kayla nervously looked at Miss Jules. She smiled warmly at me.
we may as well get to the neighbourhood rules. It's really not much to worry about. Can I have that paperwork, please?
Dave opened a folder with some papers in it. There was a map, a small pamphlet about the community center, and a printed list about our little street. Miss Jules pushed them toward me.
You can read those at your leisure, but I do have to go over some things with you tonight.
Okay, no problem. I stammered a little.
The street cleaner comes once a month. In the afternoon on the first Tuesday of the month. You'll want any cars in the driveway to be out at that time. I'm sure you saw the board in the middle by the bench. You can find information about town events, people trying to rehome things, or even some snacks for people to take. We all vote at the community centre when it's that time of year. This is all written down for you, and you can come to any of us here if you have any questions or if you need anything, but now you know where the three of us live.
Thank you. I'll be sure to leave some cookies out for everyone once I'm settled in. I didn't say more. It felt like she was done going over things. There was a bit of tension in the air. Cal cautiously peeked around the corner to see what was going on.
Hello, dear. How do you like your new home?
She held her hand down to him. He slowly approached and sniffed her for a minute before rubbing against her hand.
You must smell my Emily. She's my tortie.
Cute. I smiled. I'd like to meet her sometime.
Absolutely.
She paused before continuing.
This is an old town. Not much has changed in a long time. It's had slow growth, and many natural areas have been maintained for centuries. The trees behind our street are the edge of the state park.
Wow, that's awesome. Kayla, I'd explore with you if that's something you like to do.
I'd love to. I don't have a hiking buddy.
Kayla responded. Before I could say more, Miss Jules continued.
I'll finish up so you can get some rest tonight. There's just one more rule we all follow here.
Her face looked older than it had a minute ago, makeup crowding in the gentle creases of her face. She looked into my eyes.
Don't go outside if you hear noises at night. It's not all night, just between 1 and 3. Don't go out at that time. If you do get caught out at that time, there's Ashley Street just down the main road. You saw that, right? Park there for the night. Many of us have had to sit in our cars for a couple of hours over the years. This is a small enough town that neighbourhood knows it's just us, and they won't get worried by a car there early in the morning.
I didn't know what to think. My mind tried to come up with a logical reason. Do animals come in from the park?
Something does.
She said quietly.
It's been at least as long as I have. As long as you don't look out, there's nothing to worry about. And don't worry about Cal, he'll be fine. I keep Emily inside just to be safe. It's not every night, but you're better off just not looking out at that time at all. I know this is a lot to take in, but please just listen to it. Any of our community would talk to you if you have any questions. We'll leave you be for tonight. I'll check in soon.
With that, she stood up from the table and the others followed. Kayla waved goodbye. Miss Jules' blue hair shone under the streetlight until she made it to the door. Dave stood around another moment as we watched them go.
I know that all sounds pretty weird. People that lived here before couldn't handle it and they left. My phone number is with the paperwork if you need anything. Or if you really need something overnight, just bang on the wall and I'll hear. I'll be over at 301. Good night.
Thank you. Good night. I headed back inside, head pounding. I sat heavily on the couch and tried to absorb what I had just heard. Miss Jules looked serious, and she had been so nice. I felt bad doubting her. What was the harm in listening to her? I was normally sleeping at that time anyway, and she said Cal was safe. If they all were, being honest, I didn't want to find out. I would just stay inside and not go looking. Cal decided he was ready for bed, and I followed. It had been a long day. I fell asleep hard and didn't wake up until sunlight was streaming through my window. Cal was crying to be fed. I dragged myself out of bed as my thoughts drifted to the previous night. Maybe there was nothing. I hadn't woken up at all, and Cal was acting normally. He was fine anywhere as long as he was getting food. I got him fed and looked out my window. Miss Jules was sitting on the bench, glancing back at my house. I got dressed and headed out to see her.
Oh, good. How was your first night?
She stood up and took my hand. Slept like a log. I didn't wake up until Cow demanded breakfast. She nodded.
I'm sorry I had to spring that on you last night, but it really has to be done right away.
A few people started their mornings smiling or nodding to us. They all looked a little relieved. So, it really is true then. I'll be honest, I was half thinking I dreamt that.
Unfortunately, yes. It's how I lost my husband and our son. I didn't want to scare you too much last night. I don't have to tell you the details.
I stared blankly for a few seconds. I'm so sorry.
It's okay, honey. It's been a long time. It's just a little bit easier than it used to be. I know they wouldn't want me to spend every day sad over him.
Can I ask what happened? What happens if you look?
Are you sure?
I thought another moment. I would rather know than let the curiosity get to me. She sat back down.
We had heard the rules when we moved in together right out of school. My husband Charles and me. People had doubts about us, but we were meant to be from the day we met. When our son Joe was born, we decided we would lock him in his room for the night. We gave him the one without windows to be safe. Joe was getting a little older and we hadn't locked his room at night anymore. I guess one day he got curious or didn't believe us. We heard a scream and ran to his room. Joe wasn't there. Before I could react, Charles pushed me in and locked the door. I heard him run out and then just silence. The neighbours saw what happened in the morning and rushed to the house. They found me locked inside. There was really nothing left of them. Chunks strewn across the lawn everywhere. Blood soaked into the grass. They were buried together, just pieces. There was no way to tell who was who. That's all any of us know.
Holy shit, I whispered. I could feel the bile heating up in my stomach, threatening to come up my throat. I'm so sorry. I don't know what else to say.
I'll never get the sight out of my mind, so I try hard to make sure it doesn't happen to anyone else. You really will be okay if you don't look. I should go tend to my Emily.
I walked her home and gave her a hug. I went back inside and collapsed against the door. Cal came to see what was wrong and I scooped him up and cried. What the fuck? How is this real? I told myself again that this was the middle of the night. Just stay asleep. Stay in bed. My house was perfect. My neighbors were lovely. Just don't look for any sounds at night. I spent the rest of the day in a daze, listlessly organizing my belongings. Cal screamed at me, and I just about jumped out of my skin. He just wanted dinner, but my heart was pounding and my hands were shaking. I got him taken care of to stop his yelling. I sat at the table and slid the bottle of whiskey over towards me. Just as I was going to take a swig out of the bottle, there was a knock at the door. I was tired, but got up to check. There was a swath of black hair. It was Kayla.
Hey.
She smiled weakly at me. I stood to the side. Do you want to come in? I was just going to have a drink. She stepped in.
Mrs Jules said she talked to you. I wanted to see how you were holding up.
I stood to the side. Do you want to come in? I was just going to have a drink. She stepped in.
Thanks.
Now that I had company, I grabbed 2 glasses and a couple cans of Coke. I guess you would have heard her story too. How long have you lived here? I inquired.
Yeah. Just a bit over a year.
Have you seen anything?
No. I've never dared look. No one else has looked since I've been here. The people who lived here before finally heard noises and they left. She was pregnant. I think that's a big reason why they didn't want to stay.
So, you have heard things?
Not a lot. I started sleeping with earbuds pretty quickly. I did not need to hear anymore.
I looked at her, hoping she would go on, but didn't want to pressure her. She continued.
The first time, I just heard something walking around. It was quiet, but I could hear it rustling leaves as it went. I told myself it had just been an animal. We do live against the woods, but a couple of nights later I heard it walking again. I had blinds drawn, but I still didn't even want to look in that direction. I tried to ignore it and go back to sleep. The movement stopped. Then I heard the faintest scratch and then knocking on the window like someone tapping with just a fingernail. I found some faint footprints in the morning.
She paused to take a drink.
They were bigger than I expected. They almost looked like a deer mixed with a human. Almost like there was a heel, but then they turned cloven. I moved my bed upstairs that day and started sleeping with the earbuds that night. It helps, I really recommend it. Thanks for the drink. I should go get settled for the night. But let me know when you've had time to unpack and we can go do some hiking during the day.
She said, finishing it. Of course, and thanks for the tip. The next couple of weeks, I continued to put everything in their new places and started my new job. I was getting the hang of it. Things started to feel a little normal. Kayla and I had started hiking on Saturday or Sunday mornings, still well after the sun had risen. I hadn't heard anything at night. I never forgot to close the blinds, but I did start to forget about the noises. Nearly a month after I moved in, I heard walking through the neighborhood. I had seen deer a couple of times, coming around dusk to drink at a couple bird baths around the street. They were back. That's all it was. Still, I was glad I listened to Kayla's story and put my bedroom on the second floor. I about shit myself when I heard the tapping on my window. I whisper called for Cal. He sat up from the end of the bed. My heart sank into my stomach. The tapping continued. I reached for my phone. It was after 2:45. This should be over soon. I didn't want to disturb him, but I felt like I had to talk to someone. My hands were shaking so badly I had to retype the message about 4 times. Hi Dave. Sorry to bother you so early. I just can't sleep. I jumped as the tapping started to get more aggressive. My phone went off.
It's no problem. Don't worry. It'll be over soon. Just a few minutes and then it's over for the night. It's never gotten in. Just don't look. Let me know if you need me to come over after or tomorrow.
2:45. So close. Okay, 5 minutes. I can do that. Thank you. I think I'll get the shades. The blinds aren't good enough. Dave.
That's a good idea. Tell Cal hi for me.
I sat for another couple of minutes, and then the tapping stopped, all at once. There was no rustling of something moving away, just silence. I pulled a slightly disgruntled Cal up closer to me. With my anxiety through the roof, I didn't sleep the rest of the night. Dave caught me in the morning.
You did well. That was worse than it normally is. I could hear it from mine. Let me know if you need help with the blinds.
He waved and was on his way before I could respond. He liked talking about these things even less than the others. I couldn't blame him. I stopped to get blinds after work and didn't forget to put my earbuds in again. Things continued as they had. Work, hike, play with Cal. I was making enough at my new job to be fine, but I had spent most of my savings to suddenly move. I stopped at the local bar and started taking some shifts Friday nights, Saturdays, or Sundays. This was a smaller town, so even with a later shift, I had about half an hour by the time I got home to get inside safely. I was busy and tired, but it would be worth it. I would feel better having savings again, but I was just getting so tired. Finally, last Friday night, I was exhausted. That type of bone tired that sinks deep into your skeleton. So drained that a minor inconvenience could make you start crying. I worked every day for 3 weeks. I got home after my bar shift, 12:35. All I had to do was drag my tired butt in the house and pass out for the night. The next thing I remember is how uncomfortable I felt. My eyes snapped open. Fuck, I fell asleep. How long had it been? I had only just got home, right? I was in my own driveway with plenty of time to get in. I looked at my phone. 2:24. Fuck me. I heard something right by me. Before I could stop myself, I was looking over. All I saw were fingertips just barely placed onto my driver's side window. The rest of the hand was obscured by the door. Then there was movement. What seemed to be branches started to move. They were turning towards my car. One gnarled point making contact with my window and scraping along it. I slammed my eyes shut. One hand desperately pulled my hood over my head, and the other covered my mouth, willing my breath to get under control and not have a full-blown panic attack. I hadn't really seen anything, right? It didn't see me look. All I saw were fingertips. It could have been a normal person who got lost and ended up here. After all, the noises didn't come every night. Those weren't antlers. It was a trick of the darkness. But then, what had made the shrill scraping come from right outside? And those were fingertips, but they were too long and rough. Worn, cracked, and dirty. I curled in my seat, trying not to scream, my eyes squeezed shut. Antlers like bark, but hard enough to damage the metal, burned into my mind. There was a slap. I bit into my lip hard enough to bleed, but I didn't scream. It sounded like a hand slamming into my door, beside the other fingertips. I could hear heavy breathing. My chest ached. It felt like my heart would give out before anything else had a chance to happen. My stomach lurched as my car rocked, hard. Tears and snot soaked my hoodie. Another slam on the car and it rocked again. It felt like if it hit any harder, the glass would break. What were the rules here? Could it get in? It really seemed to be trying. A different slam echoed through my bones. The sick sound was like a head against glass, antlers scratching on the metal frame above. It slammed its head again. There was nothing I could do. Again. It wasn't in yet, and I figured my best bet was to stay down and keep my eyes shut. Again. The car rocked, gentler this time, and the slamming stopped. I couldn't open my eyes. I didn't think it was long enough. It couldn't be 3 o'clock yet, but it was so hard to tell. Minutes felt like hours. Time was dripping by like cold molasses. How long had it stopped to stare in at me before its assault? I could hear it walking about, pacing around the car, until it started to fade out. Then I heard hooves on pavement. Metal squealed and glass cracked. I screamed. Dead silence. I continued to lay curled on my side. Nothing more came. I heard Miss Jules calling me and running. I didn't dare open my eyes. It took a few minutes of convincing, but I finally held my phone up and looked. 3:12. I started uncontrollably sobbing. Fear and relief racked my body, and I laid there shaking badly, my stomach in knots. I was eventually able to unlock my door. Miss Jules ripped it open and held me in her arms. We cried together. That was nearly a month ago. I thought I'd leave that day, but I'm still here. Where else would I go? I have kind, caring neighbors. My home is nice. I talk with Miss Jules, Dave checks in on me, I hike with Kayla, and I hold Cal close. I did quit working at the bar that day. I'll never go out at night again. I sleep with earbuds and a white noise machine. My bedroom windows are shuttered tight from the inside as soon as it starts to get dark.
Thinking back, I believe all this started with the disappearance of my girlfriend. We had an amazing connection, an intensity of spirit and love that felt, at all times, uplifting and warm. We didn't need words, we simply existed in a state of bonded happiness. I thought that, maybe, that bliss had kept me oblivious to the terrible things going on around me. But the more I learned, the more I realized that nothing bad had happened before she disappeared.
And I don't mean that she left, or that I was unable to find her. I was standing outside a movie theater with her and an acquaintance that we'd run into by chance. I said something. He made a funny remark. She laughed, and then she was gone.
Nothing remained but a slight breeze from the air spilling into the place where she had been. The expression on my friend's face slowly dropped as he saw mine. This wasn't a joke, prank, or trick. She'd simply blinked out of existence. Standing there, we discussed what we'd seen in hushed tones. There were several disparate little groups of people walking in and out of the theater, but none had noticed. Superstitiously, he and I circled the building, then made a run through the inside. She was nowhere to be found. Eventually, we had no choice but to return to our homes and hope that we'd imagined the whole thing. But hours passed, then a day, and then a week. Nobody had seen or heard from her. I called her parents, but never got an answer. I went around to their place, which I vaguely remembered from a holiday visit at some time in the past. Peering into the windows, I saw the dining room that I remembered, replete with furniture and settings, but the rest of the house was completely empty. Had they moved out? If so, why was the dining room still furnished? I looked around for passerbys, but the quiet suburban streets sat desolate and lonely. I went by her work next. The grocery store and the bakery department in which she worked ran lively with bustling energy. I watched random strangers picking out fruit and vegetables in the produce section, oddly relieved to be surrounded by life again. The streets of our hometown had been feeling increasingly deserted, but I'd only truly recognized the creeping sense of isolation once it had been lifted. Here, then, everything was fine. Life was proceeding as normal, save for the absence of my girlfriend. As I'd feared, none of her coworkers had seen her. Beginning to grasp at straws, I headed for my work, hoping that maybe she'd called and asked for me. I arrived there, already uneasy. I recognized the building, certainly, but the area had the same vague aura of quiet emptiness that had surrounded her parents' house. With a dark pit tightening in my stomach, I peered in the front windows. The front desk sat within, along with all the pictures on the walls I remembered. I shook my head and laughed quietly at myself. It must have been the weekend. Of course nobody was there. Pulling out my keycard, I accessed the side door. I was intent on checking my work phone messages to see if she had called. But everything beyond the reception area was empty. Blank white walls stretched off into gloomy darkness. I couldn't understand it. I'd just met her here the other day, right here by the front desk. Where had she gone? Where had my job gone? My cubicle? My coworkers? I tried to recall them, tried to retrace their faces and personalities, but I succeeded only in summoning hollow impressions and choppy experiences that felt incomplete and secondhand. Returning to the outside of the building, I stood in a daze, unsure what to do next. While I stood there, staring absently across the parking lot, I noticed a shimmer. The opposite building across the lot began blurring, wavering, and then it vanished. For some reason, I ran toward the phenomenon rather than away from it. I had to see something, touch something for myself. Coming to the space where it had been, I found a vast, cracked foundation, free of rubble and destruction, save for several pipes now furiously spilling water from their jutting ends. "You!" I shouted at a suited businessman at the sidewalk's corner.
Me?
He asked, lowering his cell phone. "Didn't you just come out of there?" I asked, indicating the exposed foundation where a building had just been.
Yup.
"Well, where'd it go?" I asked.
What do you mean? It's right there.
He answered, the building that was right here." He seemed confused.
There's never been a building there.
"So, what, you work in an unfinished foundation?" He nodded.
That's my desk sitting over there.
Indeed, a single wooden desk sat among the jagged bricks. "Then why are the pipes shooting water all over the place?" I shouted at him. He shrugged.
Contractors cutting corners.
Not believing the surreal conversation, I looked over at the building once more, noticed his desk was gone, and turned back, but the sidewalk sat empty before me. At that moment, the true weight of what had been happening began sinking in. I fought a rising panic and tried to think. I read stories about things like this, horror, science fiction. There's always a way out, if only one could think hard enough. But in my panicked state, I couldn't recall the content of those tales. I did notice, however, that the businessman I had just talked to hadn't been cognizant of the changes, but my acquaintance and my girlfriend's disappearance had been. I had no idea where he lived, so I returned to the outside of the movie theater, hoping that he would notice strange things happening, and put two and two together the way I had. I felt a brief surge of hope as I sighted him, already sitting on the bench, waiting for me.
My house is a prop.
He greeted me sadly, his head in his hands.
The people I know, if they haven't already vanished, seem only shadows of their former selves. It's like the memories and experiences are blinking right out of their heads, the same way streets and buildings are.
Does anyone else notice? I asked him. Sitting next to him on the bench, I chose not to comment on his overly loud despair and uneven tone. I talked to one guy who remained convinced nothing weird was going on, right up until he disappeared too. He shook his head slowly. For a time, we sat in silence, just thinking. Across the movie theater parking lot, one of several trees shimmered, wavered, and vanished. He glanced over at me, and I nodded, confirming that I had seen it too. Another tree went a few minutes later, leaving a slight section of elevated highway visible. The highway blinked out of existence soon after. Then, the entire sky. Bright blue, white clouds, and burning sunlight all began shimmering and wavering. He and I both straightened at the same time.
It's symbolic.
He realized aloud, mirroring my thought.
Units of meaning disappearing one by one? How else could ideas, memories, even the goddamn sky?
Hurricane winds blasted and buffeted us as the sky itself blinked out of existence, leaving only blank, barren blackness overhead.
What could do this?
He shouted, gripping the bench. I shook my head. I had an idea, based on what I had seen since she disappeared, but it was insane. Do you think? I yelled over the loud winds.
What?
We think, therefore we are, right? I shouted. I know I think. Do you?
I think so.
He yelled back. Then we must really exist. I told him, hanging on. That means there's hope. No more remained to be said. We clung to that bench for dear life as trees, cars, buildings, even the parking lot and movie theater itself flung off into the void, shimmering, wavering, and vanishing as they went. Once the air ran out, we began suffocating, but thankfully, about 15 seconds later, the concept of breathing went too. In muted, horrified relief, we sat like sentient corpses on an aging wooden bench on a small circle of sidewalk. All that remained of the universe. Come on, please, I said without breath, without words. We had some time left. It wasn't quite the end. She appeared with a few minutes to spare. In the exact spot that she'd vanished, my girlfriend blinked back into existence, her arrival bringing a massive wave of restoration. A split-second sphere of ideation and creation brought everything we'd known back in a roaring moment. Running up to her through the dying breezes of renewal, I grabbed her by the shoulders. You're back! She smiled.
I can't believe it. I got back.
How long were you gone? I asked, trying not to sound too panicked.
It took me a few minutes to fall asleep again.
She replied, excited.
It was such a good dream. I wanted to come back more than anything in the world, but it's so rare to actually get back to the same dream.
Even though I had suspected, based on the fact that everything in our surreal existence had been based purely on her experiences and knowledge, the confirmation still hit me somewhere deep. Even as my very soul joined my panic, I forced myself to deliver the words I'd practiced while watching the world ebb. Listen to me. I don't know if this happens often, or if this is an insane and unique thing in your universe, but I turned and pointed at our acquaintance. He and I, we're alive. We're actually alive. When you woke up, your dream started falling apart, but we remained.
And we experienced every moment of it.
I'm actually thinking. I'm actually here. And so is he. She looked back and forth between us, the impact of my words slowly sinking in.
But how?
I don't know. I told her, trying to get the emotion just right, so that she would truly believe. Maybe there are more wonders in life than we can possibly know. Maybe you dreamed us into existence. Maybe we were already out here, souls waiting to be born, but your dream universe caught us and pulled us in. But we are here, and I can't begin to describe the horror waiting for us after you're gone.
Souls waiting to be born?
She asked, dazed.
That's not it.
I frowned in askance. She looked me in the eyes.
You died. You both died. That's why I was so happy to dream about you, to be with you again.
Oh, despair settled across my shoulders, and I slumped. She looked away.
This was my favorite memory. Just a nice day before the accident.
Our mutual acquaintance stood sadly.
What does that mean for us? Being dead? What are we? Is there anything you can do?
She said nothing for a long moment before an idea seemed to occur to her.
I just can't let go.
She admitted aloud.
But maybe that means we can all be together again.
She looked at both of us in turn.
Hold out. I'll be back.
She blinked out of existence. We waited there for hours, a day, a week. I wondered at the difference in time between our reality and hers. She'd said it had taken a few minutes for her to fall asleep again, whatever she was doing. I hoped it would be quick, or else we wouldn't be there when she returned. We sat watching the world die for a second time, waiting in quiet hope and silent terror. I had the distinct fear that she would return to a similar dream, a universe of the mind that looked like ours, that she believed was ours, but which contained a version of the two of us that wasn't us. Just facades, just dream figments, faking life. We'd become merely slivers of ourselves, bare consciousness and fear, by the time she returned. In a flash, all creation blinked back into existence, somehow stronger this time, brighter.
I won't wake up again.
She said with a smile and a happy conviction.
I made sure of that.
I took her hand. What did you do?
I took a ton of sleeping pills. We'll be together forever now, one way or another.
My friend came up alongside us.
You did that? For us?
She nodded, excited. See, I told you, I said to him. You gotta live the role, be the role, even when they're not here. That's the only way they'll believe you enough to do something drastic. They can usually sense our hollowness like a stain on their mind. The only way to avoid turning it into a nightmare is to become one with the dream.
What are you talking about?
She asked, confused. He grinned widely.
I guess you were right. Go ahead, you won.
I matched his grin with one of my own, only wider and hungrier.
You're not them.
She screamed, realizing her mistake too late. She pulled away, but I had her by the wrist and by the soul. Her weakened body wouldn't be able to protect her mind much longer.
Let me go!
It's far too late for that, I told her, licking my metaphorical lips in anticipation. The feast was as enjoyable as any other dreamer I'd eaten, but it was made all the sweeter by the chance to further employ my acting chops. Sitting up, I tested out her limbs one by one, and then spoke aloud, listening to the various sounds of her voice. It would be a challenge convincing others of her purely physical species that I was one of them, but I was more than up for it. For the first time in eons, I was actually excited. Excitement had almost become an unfamiliar sensation, but it was certainly warranted, as this was certain to be the role of a lifetime. Specifically, her lifetime.
It's been about 30 years since I initially became a taxi driver. When I first started, I often got work. I got paid well, and there were fewer of us. But now, it's quite pathetic, if I'm honest. I was earning more money 10 years ago than I do now, so I decided that I would retire for good, and perhaps even search for a new job. I wasn't sure what I would do. Heck, I'm a 65-year-old man who doesn't know any better. So what could I do? Little was I to know, though, that apparently your last day in the taxi industry was a lot more intriguing than most people would tend to think. On the last day, I was sat in my crappy car on a Saturday afternoon, waiting for work. Yes, waiting. Work was usually very good on Saturday, but not today. No doubt my employers were punishing me for leaving them. I just presumed. I got my first job early in the evening. I looked at the monitor, which displayed where I was to drive and who my passenger was to be. 33 Snooker Street, going to Linsfum, Tony Johnson. 33 Snooker Street? Think I've only been on Snooker Street a few times during my career. On top of that, Linsfum was a good hour's drive, so I would have made great money doing that trip. I eagerly put my gear stick in D and set off on my way. Most taxi drivers I knew drove manual, but I found automatic cars easy and relaxing, especially in big traffic. When I arrived at Snooker Street, what I saw was a tall, dirty, old apartment complex that looked like it was about to collapse any moment now. I sighed, and after placing the gear stick in P, I sent a notification to let the passenger know that I was now waiting outside. No doubt the passenger is going to want to talk to me about how my day has been, I thought. I really wasn't in a chatty mood today, but what else could I do? It was expected in the taxi industry that you would at least try to talk to your passengers. Most of them weren't bad people. Sometimes they were annoying, yes, but unless they were extremely drunk, I found the majority of people quite decent. A young, disheveled man left the complex as he glanced around urgently. Could that be my passenger, I wondered? The man appeared to be really agitated. Additionally, he also seemed to be in a hurry. The disheveled man got into a nearby car and sped away from the vicinity. Wonder what's got his knickers in a twist, I thought. As I waited and waited, I started to grow impatient. Where the hell is my passenger? I looked at my monitor again. Tony Johnson, I read out loud. Usually, I would have just given up by now and canceled the booking, but this was going to be pretty nice pay for me. Thus I left my car, slamming the door on the way out, and trotted to the main door of the apartment complex. Number 33. I reminisced what the monitor had said. I found the number 33 and pressed down on it. I heard a little buzz to let me know that the intercom was active, but nobody was answering. Hello, Mr. Johnson. You ordered a taxi. I spoke into the intercom. Nobody answered. All I heard was a clunk. That informed me that the main door was now unlocked. That was very strange. Perhaps the intercom isn't working from this end, I thought. Maybe he needs help with luggage? I pushed open the main door where I heard it creak. I followed the corridor, up the stairs, in which I checked the numbers of each apartment. Soon enough, I found number 33 on the 3rd floor. I gave a loud knock. "Mr. Johnson?" The door flew open, resulting in me immediately jumping backwards as the hair on the back of my neck prickled. From where I stood, I looked inside and saw a little girl drawing with crayons on a piece of paper on the floor. I knocked on the door again and cautiously entered, but not enough to be considered trespassing. "Excuse me, I'm a taxi driver and I'm here to pick up a man. Is that your father?" The little girl ignored me and continued drawing with her crayons. She appeared to be drawing pictures of stickmen and stick animals. "What's your name?" I questioned. The little girl looked up at me with piercing blue eyes. "Lucy. Does Tony Johnson live here, Lucy?" The little girl looked back down at her drawings and continued to scribble away. She gave a gentle nudge with the side of her small head, directing it towards a closed door within the apartment. Thud. 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 What noise was that? Thud. 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 The noise was coming from the room that the little girl claimed Tony Johnson was in. I felt my heart begin to race. I didn't like the sound I was hearing coming from that room whatsoever. "May I come in, Lucy?" I asked the little girl anxiously. She just gazed at me with apathetic eyes briefly before looking down again to resume her drawings. I have to make sure Tony is okay, I thought. If he isn't, then this poor little girl could be in a lot of trouble. I warily walked into the apartment and carefully stepped around Lucy, making sure not to unsettle her as she practiced her art. I observed the door. Thud. 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 "Mr. Johnson, are you in there?" I queried after knocking on the door a few times. I slowly pulled down on the door handle, and with a gentle push, I opened the door, and I saw a huge giant of a man, twitching and shaking from a noose around his neck, rocking back and forth. I gasped as I staggered backwards. "Lucy?" I faced the oblivious little girl, who was still scribbling away on a piece of paper. "We need to go, now," I tried to say as calmly as possible, so I didn't alarm her. Then I carefully grabbed her underneath her arms and lifted her, feeling how light she was. "Don't worry," I whispered, and Lucy gave a high-pitched shriek, almost as if she was a banshee, waiting to ambush someone. The sound coming from her mouth was deafening, and I struggled to concentrate. "Wait!" I shouted. I looked into Lucy's face and saw that it had become heavily distorted. Her piercing blue eyes had turned into little black slits. She had no nose. Her smooth skin had become wrinkly, and she had razor-sharp teeth protruding from her small mouth. Her mouth then clamped down on my right shoulder, causing me to cry out in pain. I tried to drop her, but her bite was so strong that she was practically attached to my shoulder, almost as if she was a humanoid leech. The pain I felt was unbearable. "Get off!" I screamed. I saw in the corner of my eyes somebody exit the same room, where I recently saw a huge man hanging from a noose. In a fit of adrenaline, I shoved the little girl off, and consequently, she took a chunk of my shoulder as she crashed into nearby furniture. I yelped in pain, and I got out of there. I didn't think my legs were capable of moving so fast. When I got outside, I saw that my shoulder was bleeding profoundly through my jacket. I need the hospital, I thought. I glanced up at the tall apartment complex. That was strange. Most of the windows were boarded up. I didn't notice that before. There was only one window that wasn't boarded up, and I saw two shadows observing me from above. I sprinted to my car and tried to grab the door handle with my right hand. However, my arm decided not to work, so instead I had to use my other hand to open it. Afterwards, I jumped into the driver's seat, making sure to slam the door with the same hand. As I breathed heavily, I used my left arm to clumsily place my car keys in the lock and twisted it. The car engine made a crackle, and shortly afterwards started. I awkwardly put the gear stick in D and grabbed the steering wheel with the same hand, and I sped away. As I drove away, I glanced at the apartment complex and saw two people watching me from the main door. A woman so comely she could have had anything she wanted, and the same huge man I thought was dead only minutes ago. The pair of them had an eerie smile on their pale faces. It sent a shiver down my spine, and personally, I don't usually get frightened so easily. I've encountered many drunks who tried to assault me, and I've even encountered a man who threatened to stab me, yet seeing those two gave me goosebumps. As I drove down the main road, I noticed that an ambulance was blazing past me with sirens on. I wonder where it's going, I thought. The ambulance made me consider my own injury, so I parked up and inspected my shoulder. What the hell? My wound was gone. There was nothing whatsoever to indicate that anything took a bite out of my shoulder. There wasn't even a little scratch. I then moved my right arm again in a variety of directions to see if it still worked. I was baffled at this point. What happened? I glanced at the monitor which displayed my driving jobs, and I saw that my previous job to go to 33 Snooker Street had also mysteriously disappeared. Had I just dreamed everything that's just happened, or something? I wasn't even scared at this point. I was just bewildered. Perhaps I'm going senile, I wondered. My phone started vibrating.
Finally, been trying to get through to you all day,
my boss declared. You've been trying to get through to me all day?
Yeah, but your phone was off. I thought you wanted to work today. It's your last day, right? Yet you haven't accepted any of the jobs that have come through, so I started to wonder what the problem was.
I hesitated, not sure what this meant. I'm sorry, boss. On second thought, I'm going to retire early. I hung up before my boss could protest and place my phone in my jacket pocket. My boss was trying to contact me all day, but was unable to. I remembered distinctly that I was sat in the shitty car for the whole afternoon, waiting for work. I remembered being assigned a job at 33 Snooker Street. Or did I? I wasn't sure what to believe anymore. It was a better time than any to retire from the taxi industry, so I drove home. For some background, I'm Tessa, and I'm 14. I live in Minnesota, and I go to this one camping ground up north that is kind of in the middle of nowhere. I've gone to that campground for 11 years, and still go there to this day. It was only open for a year or two before I started going there. My mom is popular there, and we know everyone. They are always having a party or staying up until 1 o'clock, getting crazy drunk. This particular night haunts me forever. Myself and my friend Chloe were best friends. She was the shy brunette, and I was the wild blonde. She always had this thing where she never liked sleepovers. This one night, she and I were planning on having a sleepover over text. Outside her camper,
Our parents did not stay out late that night for some reason. We had a fire and did regular camping things. It was about 1 when we decided to go in the shower house with showers and bathrooms. It was considered one of the best campgrounds in North America. So we were in the shower house, planning to just hang out because the shower house and lodge is the only place that has Wi-Fi. My data does not work because it is in the middle of nowhere. We planned on staying there till 3 a.m. When 2 a.m. rolls around, we need chargers for our phones. We go to her camper and grab our chargers, and on our way back, we are outside the door for some air before we go inside. Chloe is on her phone, and around the corner, behind her, is an old guy, or maybe a woman, who looks to be 100 years old. They are walking a scraggly animal that looks like a rat. I scream and tell her what I see, and the guy has a crazy smile on him. We run as fast as our legs will allow until we get inside. I start crying because I'm so scared, and she is freaking out because she does not know what was just behind her. We plug in our chargers and hesitate to call either of our parents because we feel they would get really mad at us and not even believe us. We were also out till 3 a.m. We were not even supposed to be up past 1 on that night. So now we are freaking out and ready to just bust out the door. We've been in there for an hour at this point, past the time that we saw the creepy old man. We hesitate to open the door, but eventually we open it and end up running out, and I think we are going to die. We run out the door, and as I turn around, I see the creepy old man with something that looks like a knife in his right hand, around the corner where we almost got stabbed. To this day, we remember how we were seconds away from being too slow to escape the swing of his knife. I live in a small cabin on 5 acres. My land is mostly wooded with a small creek that runs through it. Across the yard from the cabin, I have a garden. It is rather large, approximately 50 feet by 100 feet. I grow the usual: tomatoes, potatoes, onions, turnips, corn, and a few different types of pepper. I'm not a hermit or anything. I just enjoy the peace and quiet and don't get many visitors. About a week ago, I awoke in the morning and went outside to grab some tomatoes to go with the scrambled eggs I was making. As I walked towards my garden, I spotted movement and stopped. I had to be cautious, as black bears were not uncommon in this area, and I was unarmed. Suddenly, 3 huge black blurs burst from my garden and into the sky. My heart jumped into my throat until I realized that the great beasts that had just shortened my life by half were in fact ordinary vultures. Relieved, I continued towards the garden and mentally prepared myself for the small animal carcass, which would have attracted the vultures. I walked past the first few rows, and the row where the vultures had come into view. Much to my surprise, there was nothing there, not even a feather. Maybe they got tired and just dropped into a rest. I thought to myself as I walked 2 more rows over to the tomatoes. I plucked a few from the plant and headed back inside. I know most people just associate vultures with death, and with their reputations as scavengers, I can understand why. It's that association that convinces people that vultures are bad omens.
but as a person who has spent a lot of time in the woods, they were just another animal to me. So I was not bothered by the animal's presence, and I did not give the vultures another thought. That is, until 3 days later, when they returned. It was mid-afternoon, and I was returning from a swim in the creek, when I noticed about 5 vultures strutting through my garden. Now, if you haven't spent any time around turkey vultures, which is what these particular birds were, then you probably assume that they squawk, chirp, cluck, or caw. The truth is, these strange creatures do not have the ability. So, instead, they just grunt and hiss. As I approached the group, I expected the birds to fly away. Instead, all 5 of the animals turned and stared directly at me. The largest, and coincidentally closest one to me, let out a low, short grunt. He seemed to lightly nod his head as he did so. It was as if he was saying hello. I'll have to admit I was taken aback for a moment and even considered greeting the creature back. Instead, I just kept walking to my cabin and came up with reasons to not have to go back outside. For the next 2 days, when I would go outside, there would be anywhere between 3 and 8 vultures just standing in my garden. They never touched anything or caused any trouble. They just stared at me as I would go about my business picking vegetables for meals. On occasion, 1 or more of them would let out that same low grunt as the large one. I was spooked by that point, but not enough that I would attempt to shoo them away. I am a live and let live person, and didn't want to cause them any trouble if they weren't causing any themselves. I wish I had tried to get rid of them, because yesterday morning I was awoken by a cacophony of low grunts, with the occasional long hiss peppered in for enhanced terror. I looked out the window and had to stifle a scream for fear of agitating the living nightmare that was before my eyes. The entirety of my yard was covered in vultures. It was a sea of dark feathers and bright pink heads. A chill ran down my spine as each and every horrid animal turned their heads and stared directly at me. I was frozen in place as they all grunted in unison. It felt like my mind was vibrating in conjunction with the grunt. I felt woozy, and the last thing I remember is reaching out for the drapes as I collapsed on the floor, unconscious. I woke up not long after with a splitting headache. I slowly stood to my feet, my vision still blurry, and my legs very wobbly. As my eyes focused, my panic increased. The entirety of my cabin, except for a 6-foot circle around me, was completely covered in vultures. The fight or flight instinct kicked in, and while I'm not exactly proud to admit it, I picked flight. I ran to my bathroom, quickly opened the door, entered the room, and slammed the door behind me. My heart thudded against my ribcage, as if it was attempting to flee even further from these terrifying beasts. I could hear those winged demons scratching and clawing to get into me. I have been stuck in that bathroom since yesterday, and unfortunately, when I woke up this morning, I found out why the vultures were here. I had just finished eating the last bit of breath mints that were in the medicine cabinet. As I closed the cabinet, I got a good look of myself in the mirror. My eyes were sunken in the dark. The veins that ran through my face were bulging and a discolored purple hue. I looked down at my hands. They were black and green in places. I am losing feeling as I type this. A tear
ran down my cheek as I realized the truth. The vultures were here because they realized I was dying before even I did. I hope you guys enjoyed tonight's stories. I want to thank Kydraws, Judge Panther, Tessa Engen, Eclosion K2, Oriachum, and M59 Gar for their stories, as well as Whispering Scream, Mr. Fear, Natnator, Creepy Kavatapi, Jimmy Horrors. I also want to thank my patrons, and especially my first, Shadowthread Stories. You will find links to the voice actors in the description, and links to the authors in the pinned comment. I would appreciate it if you guys checked out their stuff, and when you do, let them know that Dubach the Keeper sent you.